Good evening. I don't know what time it is in the world where you are, but I know that where I am, it's 3 o'clock, 3:20 in the afternoon. For Rosalyn, who is still in my country, it's 12:20 in the afternoon. And it's evening or early morning in Pakistan. So I say, wherever you are in the world, this is Carla from Rehan Allahwala's World of Connections. But today we're also coming from the Ministry of English Literacy for the Insan Party that Rehan Allahwala has begun to talk about the importance of English and communication in English. And I have Rosalyn Kahn as my guest to speak about it today. And I'm very anxious to hear what she has to say when it comes to using English worldwide and globally. Rosalyn, will you please introduce yourself?
Hi, Carla. It's truly a pleasure and honor to be with you today, the ministry, and everyone else who's watching. My name is Rosalyn Kahn. I'm in beautiful Los Angeles. I'm a TEDx speaker, I'm an author, a humanitarian, a college professor, and a few other things, but I am also taught English as a second language in the college and university. And it truly was one of my favorite classes to teach because these people were the most devoted learners of any that have crossed my path. And it always holds a special place in my heart.
Okay, so tell us a little about your life. Are you originally from California? Where are you from?
I'm originally from San Diego, California. I was raised as one of seven children. I was the fifth in line. I went to school in UC Santa Barbara and I got a degree in sociology with an emphasis in communication studies. And then I spent a year traveling around the world promoting cultural understanding that also left a major impression on my life. And then I moved back to Los Angeles, and previously I did some work in radio and television. And I moved to Santa Fe, New Mexico, where I worked for a Spanish radio station called K-Bomb. And if you know anything about Spanish media, they're kind of like divorces. They change every several months. There's more radio stations than there are people, so they're always changing place. And so I was there for a short while, but I loved the landscape, the mountains, the balloons, the Indian culture, the Indian bread. Wonderful. And I moved to San Diego, California, where I worked for a Univision station. And it was really a wonderful thing. Came to Los Angeles, and I've been here ever since. And that's my story.
And you're sticking to it.
That's right.
Now that you're sticking to it, let's move on a little. It seems like you've done a lot of traveling around the world. In doing that, what have you learned about English? And is it important to be speaking English throughout the world?
Well, I'm going to give you a humorous thing because I know you love to laugh. And I remember when I visited Egypt, they would say with their beautiful Egyptian accent, "Welcome to Egypt. So wonderful to meet you. Please come and have some tea." And it's I just love that beautiful accent. To me, when I speak to people in different languages, I love accents, and that's why I loved English as a second language. But English is really the language that opens up and it unifies people all over the world. If people want to move up in the world, they have to have a command of the English language. And even in my classes I teach now, the grammar, the spelling, the punctuation, they're important. They really are important. It's not a happenstance. And so, there's a lot that we can get from watching television and listening to radio, but it's also, I want to say, important to be able to write in English, knowing how sentences begin, how they end, what's a complete sentence, what's a complete thought, and all those other good things that come into written communication. And so here's my tip. There's a great program when you write a Word document that when you hit the review key and you hit the review key, there's a function there that allows you to auditorily hear what it is you've gone ahead and put in that text. So you can have someone reading back your thing and it helps it make sense. And hey, it's a great way to learn that English language. If you make a mistake, it can read it and you can see if you can hear out those sounds of the words that don't go there.
Wow. So how have you actually been teaching English as a second language around the world, or tell
Well,
me a little about that?
well, when I was an ESL teacher, when before they made the change, I would have people from India, from Iraq, from El Salvador, from Peru, from many different places. And I always said the beauty of teaching English as a second language is you can learn about all the culture and all the foods, and you don't have to buy an airline ticket, and you don't have to get shots to go there. um, in the coronavirus. Um, but yes, and it's funny, some of those funny experiences on that same trip to Egypt. I was on a bus and the guy knew how to speak English, but he didn't know how to speak Spanish. And here I was in Israel talking in a bus on Spanish because he knew English, but he didn't know Spanish. And so I was the Spanish tour guide. I didn't discount my fee either. But English is a good skill to have, and yeah, it's really amazing when people learn the command of the English language. They can do wonderful things. I ran into a former student of mine who was a singer, and she came and saw me in Hollywood and in one of the events I was doing, and she goes, "Oh, Professor Kahn, it's so good to see you." And I said, "I remember you. You were the piano teacher. Yes, yes, yes." And I had written a book and she said, "Oh, how did that come?" I said, "Oh, it's been published and this, that, and the other." And it was just so great seeing her. And another student of mine is a famous chess player. And I was at a political event and I mentioned the lady's name and he goes, "I know her. I know her." I'm like, "She used to be my student." So it's you never know where these paths will go ahead and cross. Um, and I've been in countries around the world and seen people that I knew from different places in another. I was in on some square in England, and this guy comes up and I had on my Up With People shirt and he says, "I know that organization." And I said, "Really?" He said, my daughter traveled, and it turns out I actually knew his daughter. So there's 6 degrees of separation. You'll never know who we might know.
And that's what I find so amazing around the world, that it really isn't that far. Um, have you been using technology when you're teaching English? Because now we're in a world where basically we're all using Zoom or
Yeah, we're all going ahead and using Zoom. But one of the things I used to do with my students in the ESL class is I would take them to plays and I'd bring in the videos. And one of the great videos was 12 Angry Men, where we didn't have the 3 hours it needed to go ahead and see that. And I always wanted to prepare my students for what they were learning. So we talk about, there's these 12 men and there's a trial and they're trying to figure out, and we're going to watch these jurymen and let's go ahead and watch the film. And we'd watch the film and we'd stop and, okay, anybody have any questions? What's going on? And of course, we never had time to go ahead and get to the end of it. And so the students wanted to see what the end was. And they went out to their local library to go ahead and get a copy of that video so they could see the end. And then once we went to the theater production, we would then meet afterwards so we could have a conversation and reinforce it. And I think I used that analogy when I was talking to my students on something or another and saying, first we do the first draft, kind of like my students would do this, and then we have the second draft so you can go ahead and confirm and make sure that you got it right. And technology is a great thing. Um, yes, indeed.
so. Can you give me a specific way that you have used technology with your learning and with your teaching?
Well, there's a great video that I have in my class for their persuasive speech, and it is about a woman who says, can I talk cheesy to my students? And it's a great speech that is talking about how this communication scholar in Philadelphia had to teach all these engineers, and she couldn't figure out how she was going to have anything in common. And she goes ahead and begins the speech, and she's like Alice in Wonderland with wonder of how she's going to communicate with these people. And, it's like looking down those rabbit holes. You never know who's going to be there. And the speech goes ahead and follows the particular sequence. And I use that as an instructive means of watch this video, look at the parts of the motivated sequence, what got our attention, what established the need, what was the problem they had, how did she solve it, what were the consequences, and what was the call to action. And if you watch this video on this professor and how she learned to teach these people English, she broke it down in simple terms. She said, there's a problem when you talk in big words and big language people don't understand, so you have to break it down into simple things and break it down to simple constructs. And she said, forget those PowerPoints, make really simple charts that have simple words that we can understand, so that when you get to the end, the consumer, who's the end user, is going to be able to understand, to make sure that he knows how to resolve that computer problem or whatever it is that you're solving. And that's how I teach my students the motivated sequences. We'll watch a video in class, they'll watch this video on their own, they'll be able to break it down, and once they've gone ahead and break it down and seen the parts of this speech, it's much easier for them to learn how to convince someone in a speech that they're going to be delivering on their own.
Now, have you done any of this online? Like, have you been teaching any English online at all?
Well, I teach public speaking online. There is a young gentleman you might be familiar with, Rehan, that I'm working with, and working with him and helping him on his English skills so he can migrate. And I had him watch an event that I was at where there were these young kids performing, and then I asked him to describe to me what he remembered, and to compare and to contrast of what was going on. And so I use videos as a way of reinforcing and then coming back and using it as a form to teach communication. You saw it. Okay, what did you see? What did you like the best? What didn't you like the best? How would you describe it to someone? And I've used it in that format of working with him. And I find that you have to have a similar form of reference of something that you can connect with. And I was asking him in his learning with you and Cynthia what you had done, and you talked about favorite books and favorite movies, and kind of following that same principle, finding a common ground. So once that you have established that common ground, you know the story of what that movie was about. Now go ahead and tell me. And it's really important when a person learns a language to have that opportunity to speak with a native, because otherwise it's a stunted or a broken communication. And we know that communication flows like a song, not like a staggered communication as a person who was out drinking or something like that.
And communication has two parts to it.
Mhm.
One is speaking. By the way, before we go on, I'm curious, was this one of the young kids who have been at the kids show on a Sunday, or an older
No,
kid?
no, no. I invited my student who I'm working with on their English skills to watch the kids show, because oftentimes when you watch children, it's so much easier to learn the language. And I use that as a base for him to go ahead and look at um, and review. And then I sent him the link, so we're going to continue to have a dialogue, because there was a video that was made of that presentation. And I believe, as you know, your videos always serve multiple purposes. For you and I sitting here watching today, for all the people who's going ahead and listening, and for your other students, go ahead and watch this. And what words did you understand, and what words were confusing to you?
We should ask them to come to the shows and get a little more practice. That's up to you. I don't want to push it.
I'm sorry, so which shows are you talking to?
My English shows
Oh, yes, yes,
on
yes.
Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday.
Yeah, I think this gentleman goes to your class. I think you work with him. Um, his name is he's trying to learn English so he can go to graduate school so he can help his family out.
Okay, we'll leave it at that because I
Yep.
speak to so many that I don't.
Yeah, you speak to a lot of them, and it's amazing the great work that you do with those students. And it reminds me of a class I used to teach that was my fun one. I think I told you about it last time. It was English dialogue, and you'd say, what shall we talk about today? You know, in the newspaper, there's the Navy nuclear workers charged with trying to pass along secrets. There's an article here about teachers and what teachers do. There's an article about the beach and the oil. And then there's the fanfare of, you know, will the Dodgers make it or not? Which of these multiple topics would you like to go ahead and discuss? And by a voting of the class, they picked which story in the news they wanted to go ahead and speak on.
And that's important because you are using technology with that because you're having them look things up. Now, are they sitting physically in class when you're doing that, or is that a
Well, you know, the class I teach right now is public speaking. I'm not teaching the other than the one student I'm working with. Um, in the class, it's a lot of me talking and them going ahead and speaking or listening to a speaker and going ahead and giving feedback to them. We did a fun exercise the other day that I'm sure you could utilize to your class, and we were talking about vocal variety. And I would give a speech to the students, and it would confirm what the terms were that they had learned in the textbook. And then I turned the table and I said, now I want you to go ahead and create a story of your own that uses these colorful language and try it out on your own. So we'd learn alliteration, we'd learn personification, we'd learn similes, we'd learn metaphors, oxymorons, and so forth. And I gave him a story, and it was a story that I love to give, and I'll give it to you so you can understand. I'd like to, so here we are. Welcome to my class. I want to give you a story, and I want you to think about these following terms I've just mentioned to you and see how many of you can identify. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I'd like to introduce you to a good friend of mine, Mr. Cold Sore. You might see it right about here. And for those of you who've never had a cold sore, let me tell you what it's like. Imagine if there was a volcano erupting from your lip. It burned like the passion of fire, and a tiger came and took his claw and it scratched it to get rid of that itch. Now, it burns so much that you must take a hot boiling compress, press it to release the pressure, and the blood will come and circle down and dribble on your face. Now, let me tell you, this will only occur on the most important days of your life. It is your wedding day. It is your graduation. It is the day that you appear in court. It is the day of that big interview. Now, don't get your mind in the closet or where else you think this came from. It's a virus that's in the body that you're just born with it. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, one last special, very special warning. If you have one of these, do not greet your friends and bestow kisses on their face or their chin, because you will share the curse with them. And so they listened to the story, and I'd ask them, so what did you hear? Oh, well, there was some personification here, there was a metaphor here, there was an oxymoron there. And I'd say, don't just tell me what were the words that I used. Did I say that? And after they'd finished that, I'd give them an exercise and I'd say, now, it's your turn to create your own story. And I want you to think back about a person that you had in elementary school, about some peculiar habit they had, and use that colorful language to go ahead and describe it. And oh, they had such a lovely time, and they shared it with the people in their class, the classroom, and we cheered them on. And I say, well, this is great. So when you're giving your speech, you might think about bringing the audience in with a great introduction about describing a person or some characteristics of them to get them to want to listen to your speech. And there you have it.
How wonderful.
Yep, yep. So it's one of my favorite lessons, one that I enjoy teaching the most. It's that thing on language, and I enjoy writing and speaking, and so it's a way to bring it all to them and to show everybody, regardless of where they're from, that we all have talents if we simply spend the time. And so many people are in a rush and a hurry to get it done that they don't take out the time.
And that's the part of life right now. There's so much in the rush to get something done that really nothing gets done because you're pushing it way too much. However, part of that is very important. When you told the story, you told it in a very funny way, but listening to it was a lot of fun. Learning to listen is a part of communication. How do you think we can best teach listening?
I think the important part of listening is there's a funny little test that I give, and it's a joke. It's a list of 20 different questions of what you should do from A to Z. And the very first question says, read through everything first, and when you're done from reading through it, you can then turn over the paper and put the pencil down and just sit and smile. Well, the problem is most people fail to read the directions. And so they're working out these mathematical formulas, and 2 minutes is passing and 3 minutes is passing. And what are you guys doing? Did you read the paper? Did you listen? And they go, yeah, you said to read this paper and then go ahead and follow and do what it said. So we read the paper and did what it said, but did you read it carefully? And the part of listening is that I read in a communication textbook that on an average day, the average person will remember 50% of what was gone ahead and said, which is why in a communication class I teach every day about the specific goal and the thesis and repeat it each and every day, because maybe one day they'll get the specific goal, the next day they'll get the thesis, the next day they'll get how many times it needs to be in the speech. But 2 days later, you go to half, and then you go to 4 to 5 days later, it's down to a quarter that they retain. And that's why in a speech that you need to restate that thesis 5 different times so they know what that speech is all about. Or when you're listening, to teach people to listen for the main points and to write down some details so they can remember what the person was going ahead and talking about. And so they know as they're going ahead and listening and they're trying to go ahead and detail those things, they're like, God, they said so many things. How can I go ahead and get it down? Or as somebody is giving me something to write down, I'll go stop, because I have a great retention in getting chunks of information. The average person can remember 3 to 5. And so I'll get the first 3 to 5 and let me make sure I got this correct, and then go to the next part. And don't be afraid to have someone stop. Don't be afraid to have someone go ahead and repeat what they said. You want to practice active listening, and active listening is, you and I practiced at the beginning of our conversation today. I said your computer went ahead and broke up. I said, is what you said this, and is what you said that, and going ahead and repeating back for clarification that you got, that the information was taken in. And so many of us are in that hurry that we get the one method of communication. Did you get what I said? Okay, all right, bye, see you later, take care. And you haven't confirmed what needs to be done. And I think so many things could be corrected if we just got that feedback. I was conferring with another person, if only you had said it like this, then I would have known like that. And she said, well, I went ahead and I wrote it and I said this, and it took 2 days for me to get the message back because we're on the other side. But if you had said you needed it, and you needed it right now, then I would have stopped what I was doing regardless of what was happening, and I would have sent you something. And it's the age-old question of repeat back what you heard from me, making sure that when you send those messages, you're specifically correct on what those messages say, because how many times have I sent a message that had a misspelling in it or something wrong? And they said, I don't understand what you're trying to say, Rosalyn. Like, oh, well, slow down. So I'm guilty of that myself.
But in saying that, we all, I don't care who we are, every person thinks a little differently.
That's right. And they have their own way of making sense of information. And so um, it's why listening is also a looking situation. You've got to look at the other person, read their face, read their expression. Is there an expression of, or are they confused? Are they following along? And if you get that means that you need to go back and I see there's some questions here. Let me go ahead and put that in another way. And which is why you want to have eye contact when you're looking at the person, not at a phone, not at a book, not somewhere else, is looking face to face to make sure and confirm that information gets there and is complete.
But can we at any time be really sure that we are actually hearing what the person is saying, or are we hearing what we want to hear? And that goes even you and me as we are talking now.
Right. I mean, it's a hard thing because if we go back to the communication model, and the communication says this box that we're in, this is the arena that we're going ahead and talking. There's you on one end, I'm the speaker, you're the listener, but there's this thing that goes back and forth, and that's the feedback. But there's all sorts of things that happens of my computer might zap and the technology might go ahead and collapse and then it would break down and you wonder what happened to me. And at the same time, there's these little messages inside my head of think about this, don't think about that, push that aside, don't say this, don't say that. And the biggest problem in today's world is people are doing so many things. I had a professional development class that talked about being present, which means everything that's preceded this conversation is not in this conversation, and we need to leave it out. We need to leave it behind. As I said, take your backpack of problems and leave them on the back step. And when you leave, you can go ahead and pick them up and carry them forward. And I think in today's world, the idea of being present and telling people it's making a conscious act or a commitment to yourself that when you're in a conversation to be completely entirely present and whatever else has preceded or follows is not in that conversation. So we can think that we have, but so many times there's something else. For example, I don't need to know, but you said there was an emergency that came up before the call, and I hope that everything was okay. And it was, but I don't know if you're still thinking, is that person who contacted you, is it all right or is it okay? I mean, we're having a conversation before me, I've got a major computer issue that I've got to go ahead and deal with. And I'm not very happy about that, but we're not talking about that because that's not a part of our conversation here. And so we've seen in this example, there's outside external, and we count on one another that when we're here, we're talking about speaking and listening and not all the other things that we mentioned here.
And yet at the same time, because of what may have happened before, or maybe I'm excited, and I'm not, this is not true, that I'm excited about something happening in 20 minutes, so I just want to shut you up and get it done. That is not the issue, folks, if you're hearing me say that now.
Well, right, and it's like so many times, and we're all guilty of that. We're all guilty of that, and it's like to to really master communication, it's having the ability to be honest and forthright. I had a conversation with a person yesterday, and every suggestion I made, she counter replied it to. And I thought to myself, are you really listening? And then she would go, I really need some help because I really don't understand this. I really don't. And I'm like, maybe you should just give the person a call and give them a chance to see what they have to say. And I send a message to someone else. I'm like, is this person really right for this organization? She might need a coach or a confidence coach because there's too many questions. And if you give a person a suggestion, you want them to take the suggestion, you know, and use it.
And many times these suggestions that you're talking about may be very clear to you, but because the other person thinks differently, it's a completely different story.
Right. And that's the game that we have. You've heard of the common game of telephone, where you get a line of people and you go ahead and you give a message. The sky is blue, and it comes out of Mary went to her house and had dinner there is the end message after 25 different people. And that's just an example of going ahead and saying the sky is blue. Tell the next person the sky is blue, and they're thinking about lunch and they're thinking about dinner, and suddenly it goes ahead and it gets twisted around. It gets twisted around. And that's why I'm sorry, I just keep going back to if you go back to what's the most important thing the person said, which is the purpose, and you go back to the thesis of the things that they keep coming back to, and you hone in on those words. We're talking about speaking and listening. We're talking about communication, and keep a focus on that. And everything else is just subsequent details that we take out of it that goes ahead and makes what speaking and listening is really, truly all about.
And that's the point. That we think that speaking and listening may mean something quite different than we give it credit for. And that it doesn't matter, even if you're the best of friends, whatever you're saying to someone, they may not hear what you're saying.
Right.
I have a friend today who said to me prior, I need a break. I said, okay, take a break. But we had some things that were hanging that needed to be taken care of. And today, you never gave me the break. And I said, we had agreed that X, Y, and Z needed to be taken care of. And from my side, I thought I was doing what I was supposed to be doing. Mm-hmm. But from that person's side, I wasn't even listening to what he was saying because I was stuck in what was being said, what needed to be done.
Right.
We all need to understand, and I'm talking more than I usually do during a conversation. We all need to understand that sometimes we get so stuck in our thinking that we lose out on what is actually being communicated. Would you agree with that?
No, definitely. And that's why it goes back to the whole thing of presence. Just do one thing at a time. I went to an event this weekend and they were all commenting on the pictures. And before I went to bed that night, I said, a picture paints 1,000 words, but I wanted to go ahead and I wanted to write a paragraph. It was really great at this weekend that we saw person X, and person X is recently retired and what they're doing. And you know what person Y is doing? Person Y is doing this, and person Z is doing this, and person Q is doing this, and person Z is doing this. Because to me, it gave them a sense. And yet it was just a picture, and people had their own interpretations of what they were making of that, and we should show up to the next one. And it was 1,000 things going on. Do I really have time? Is it the time now to go ahead and do it? But it's that thought process. And how often do we take that thought process and just let it go by the wayside? Oh, well, I don't have time for that.
I'm totally enjoying this. However, I don't want to keep you forever.
Oh, of course.
But that's the whole point of communication. Whether we're playing that telephone game where we start, she is wearing a pink sweater and it ends up she is wearing a pink sweater, but she's going to this party and she doesn't like the party or
Right.
whatever, just because whatever we hear from our own point of view. Do you
Right.
agree?
Yeah, we all take things through our own perspective and what things mean and how it is that we make and share meaning, which is always the beauty of when you're dealing with different cultures. Um, you know, it's I gave an example and here it was. I was teaching these people this breathing activity that I learned on this lady Caprice's show. And it was I don't want to offend anybody, but I'm going to stick my tongue out. It doesn't mean to be disrespectful. It's part of this process of how we go ahead and relax. And of course, before I say it, I have to give this precursor so that everybody's with me and not thinking that I'm being strange or whatever. And so it's just be aware of the people in your surroundings and how it is that they make and share meanings and qualify, ask questions, and say what you don't understand and confirm before you leave of what the commitment was that you made so that people are on the same page.
Right. And sometimes it means a little more talking than you want, and maybe talking instead of texting. But communication is a very fragile skill. And I don't think we realize that.
Definitely.
Rosalind, I really want to thank you for speaking with me tonight. I have totally, totally enjoyed it. Of course, for us, it's not tonight yet. But thank you so very much. Do you have any words of wisdom that you want to leave our audience with?
No, I just want to say, Carla, it's really a privilege and an honor. I know that you do so many wonderful things in the world of helping people with the English language skills, helping bring people together on so many different platforms. It takes a lot of responsibility, and I don't think you often give yourself enough credit for the wonderful things that you do and the huge impact that you make on the world. And so I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of the wonderful things that you do. And I know there's going to be many great things that we have to look forward to. So I thank you so much for this honor and this privilege. And they know where you're at. They know where I'm at. And, we'll give it a wrap.
Thank you so very, very much. And I want to thank those who watch or will watch on replay. And thank you, Rosalind, for taking the time to speak with me tonight.
Well, thank you for giving me the time. And I hope everyone has a beautiful evening, morning, and afternoon, wherever you might be watching this today.
And with that, we are going to wave goodbye and we will see you again.
Yep.
Have a good day, peeps.
Have a good day.